Welcome back to the Resilient Philosopher. This is the Leon Dantes, and today we're going to challenge one of the most manipulated trends in modern society: self care. We'll break down what it is and what it isn't, and how emotional intelligence ties into everything, including the trap of social media. Now, let's define what self care is. It is not indulgence, consumerism, or escape. It is the deliberate, ongoing act of nurturing our physical, emotional, and psychological well being in alignment with personal values, not temporary comfort. So let's begin with a confession. Self care has been hijacked, and it's not about branding, not balance. Real self care means turning off the noise, not adding more. It means knowing when to say no and not just when to light a candle. It is to practice of the alignment, aligning your choice with your self being or well being and not your likes, not your trends. So, how can we really learn more about self care? Well, self care is tied into emotional leadership, and it is in form of a emotional self leadership. It involves proactive choices that align with your long term resilience. And self care is emotional intelligence and action. When you regulate your energy, you set boundaries and say no with clarity, that's self care. Not everyone will clap for it, but your future self will, and he will thank you too. Now, you might be asking, what is emotional intelligence? Well, emotional intelligence is the capacity to recognize, understand, manage, and influence your emotions and the emotions of others. According to Daniel Goleman, emotional intelligence consists of five domains: self awareness, self regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. Now, in my philosophy, emotional intelligence also integrates what I call last week the trinity of life: honesty, living and leading with truthfulness and self awareness. As you can see, that will be one of the characteristics. Integrity, aligning with values with consistent action and accountability, self regulation, and motivation. And then a spirituality, which is honoring the unseen self and the sacredness of personal growth. That acquires the other three. So, once again, that trinity of life is emotional intelligence, which is what Daniel Goleman talks about in the book Emotional Intelligence, which is a great book. I highly recommend it. I really enjoy reading it. There's also Emotional Intelligence 2.0, which is just as great or better than the first one. Emotional intelligence is not just knowing how to communicate better, it's knowing how to feel without becoming a prisoner of those feelings. It's knowing how to read a room without betraying yourself. If you only know how to sound emotionally intelligent but can't lead yourself through pain, you're performing leadership, not embodying. So self awareness starts with pausing. See, overseeing your thoughts without judgment or noticing patterns without criticism. You can change what you won't confront. Pause and ask, what am I feeling? Why am I nubbing? Self awareness is the mirror most people avoid because it shows us who we've become when we stop checking in. And that is perhaps one of the hardest things for us as humans. And what is amazing is what really separates us from the rest of the animals in the animal kingdom. It is self awareness. And it can be so hard to actually pay attention to our own problems, our own obstacles in our life. And that really stops us from being able to move forward and overcome situations. For example, it's always easier to say, well, he hurt my feelings. You're putting yourself first. By being self-aware is knowing what did you do for that person to hurt your feelings. And it's not putting blame on yourself. That's a misconception. Putting blame on yourself is also lack of self awareness. Because if you haven't done anything to be mistreated, then that's on them. But if you cut off a person while you're driving and that person sticks their middle finger out the window, starts hollering things at you, and you go, that was uncalled for. Well, yes, he shouldn't act that way, but you did cut him off. So once you're self aware of things like that, then it becomes easier. Because then when that person is screaming and throwing the middle finger out and saying all those obscenities, you can simply say to yourself, well, I made a mistake. I'm sorry that it makes you that upset, but you have to move on. I'll make sure not to do that again. And that's it. You'll feel better about yourself. And at the same time, you're using emotional intelligence. You're not buying into the same emotions as the other person, but you are aware of your own emotions because nobody likes being screamed at. Nobody likes being insulted. Therefore, it's easier to let it go. Now, the double life of social media, how social media helps and harms your emotional stability. Social media is the most powerful mirror of our emotional immaturity. It offers us a connection, but it rewards performance. You may call it self-care, but if your rest is wrapped in dopamine loops and comparisons, you're self-sabotaging in disguise. And now, what is digital dopamine addiction? It is a neurological stress and emotional fatigue caused by passive scrolling and overstimulation. And I think it's fair to say that we have all come into that situation at one point or another in the time that we're living in, where technology is everywhere and we're constantly looking for stimulation, something that would take us out of our regular routine, out of our problems. One can say even imaginary life or imaginary world. Every like is a hit. Every reel is a distraction. But your brain doesn't reset in those moments. It gets flooded. And research shows that elevated cortisol reduce sleep quality and worsening of self-esteem tied to social media overuse. And again, that's not care, that's corrosion. And then let's analyze when self-care becomes self-neglect. Understanding the difference between restorative self-care and escapism. If you need to escape daily just to feel okay, your self-care is really self-neglect. Leaders who overperform and underheal will eventually collapse under the weight of their own silence. That's part of burning out when it comes to work, especially when you have a leadership role. When you are the head of a household as well, you're so focused on getting everything done and making sure that you are satisfying the needs of others that eventually it all collapses on you and you just get burned out. That's why a good leader does not feel less of a leader for asking for help. And not only just asking for help, but showing people what the help needs to be like and what is expected of them when they're helping you. And that is why a lot of times people just burn out when they're in a leadership role, whether it's supervisor, manager, CEO, doesn't really matter. Even an employee, regular employee, if you're always pounding on them that they're not doing a good enough job, then eventually the core of my philosophy becomes true. Everything can be nothing, but nothing can't be everything. So if you're constantly saying you're doing wrong, then the mindset comes in of, I'll never do right. If everything I do is wrong, then how could I ever do anything right? So when you are doing self-care, it is important to focus on the self and not trying to escape by putting like a badge on it. Now, detoxing without disappearing. Setting boundaries without total withdrawal from digital life. You don't need to disappear. You need discipline. That means no phones on bed, a screen-free hour, a social media Sabbath. These are not punishment, they are reconnection to the core self. Now, there's many people that have spoken about this. Atomic Habits, another great book. Simon Sinek, and multiples of his speeches and books, he has talked about detoxing from digital life. I took one of their advice, which is not using my phone on the dinner table. And it really does make a difference. I'm constantly on my phone because my excuse is for work, but I need to slow that down and self-regulate more, especially when it comes at night. I think that's one of the things that is affecting my sleep the most. And maybe it's time to leave my phones in the office and I'll hear it if it rings. So yes, I am one of those that are to blame for neglecting my self-care by using digital way too much, the digital life. Now let's do a self-care audit, a tool to check your habits, energy, and emotional alignments. I created a worksheet that will be tied into the article released tomorrow actually today when the episode comes out. I usually try to have the article ready the same day that the episode comes out. So at the latest, it will be there on Wednesday for you guys to read it. It will be the same name as the episode, so it will be easy to find. And that worksheet is a self-care audit. It's simple, powerful, and is painful in the best way. It asks questions that your routine avoids. You'll find it in the blog, like I said, and it will be part with the same name as the episode. And now let's get to the philosophy behind all of this. Silence is the foundation of mental leadership and self-restoration. And the Resilient Philosopher, and the book I wrote, silence is where the resilient mind retreats to repair itself. Self-care is not escape. It's a return to clarity, to dignity, to a mind that's no longer chained by algorithms. So leading through self-care, that is modeling emotional hygiene as a conscious leader. If you call yourself a leader, your first duty is to yourself, not an arrogance, but an example. Because your emotional clarity becomes your team's stability. Your rest becomes your family's rhythm, and your peace becomes your message. So leadership and legacy through intentional self-care. Self-care is not a weakness. It's a sovereignty. And if we are to heal, then this generation, we must stop rewarding our exhaustion and start honoring our emotional wisdom. Download the self-care audit worksheet. Reflect on your digital habits that's no longer serving you. Share this episode with someone who thinks silence is laziness. And remember that most radical forms of leadership is to rest with purpose. Then, most importantly, I would like to remind everyone that our leadership book, The Resilient Mind, Volumes 1 and 2 are now available. You can get them through the website or you can go to Amazon. Volume 2 is available in pretty much every digital reader, but it's available on our website to be downloaded as a PDF. And right now it's in a special. Most places is between 99 cents and $1.99 if I'm not mistaken. And the other part of it will be The Resilient Philosopher, The Prism of Reality. That is the book that the show is based on. And I'm still working on another book in philosophy. I'm still not sure of the name, but it will be to elaborate further in my point of view when it comes to life. So I strongly recommend for anyone to read those 3 books. And I also recommend reading the Emotional Intelligence book by Daniel Coleman. Really good books because I don't think we talk enough about emotional intelligence. And unlike IQ, intelligence quotient might be something that you're born with and cannot really make it better. Now, you can make it worse, but perhaps you cannot improve an intelligence quotient due to the fact that some of us are better with our hands, some of us are better with books, some of us are better with patterns. So most psychologists don't agree 100% on the IQ test being accurate 100%. Again, like the old saying, you can be book smart and not street smart. And then you can be street smart and not book smart. And either one or both of them can be successful. But when it comes to emotional intelligence is something that you can actually work on and make it better and progress. And whether you are low in the emotional intelligence assessments or whether you rate high, it is something that you continuously have to work on. There's no graduating point of it. Research has shown is that people with high emotional intelligence become natural leaders. People like following those that are empathetic, that are truly demonstrating that they care to lead. Because it is important for us to be able to understand others. Reading all these books about leadership was what took me to the path of getting a degree in psychology. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed a lot, and I really recommend everyone to read as much as they possibly can, about self-care and leadership books. Most leadership books will have a lot of self-care information in there due to the fact that you cannot lead anyone if you don't lead yourself first. And I could not say enough and remind people enough, leadership is not a title, leadership is not a position. Leadership is the initiative that we take every single day to help ourselves and others, to show initiative for empathy, show initiative for helping in any possible way. The moment that you decide to take a step forward instead of backwards, you're being a leader. So you can be a leader at home, a leader at work, a leader 24/7. The only thing you really have to do is take the initiative to do what's right for yourself and for others. And I would like to remind you, once again, every Tuesday, we will have a new episode until further notice. And always show up for yourself and keep resilient, because we are all the resilient philosopher.